My name is Hannah Blake. I'm 40 years old now, but some mornings I wake up as that terrified 12-year-old again. The day my parents told me they loved me and then left me alone in a train station 3 hours from home. I remember the high ceilings of Union Station, how the voices of travelers echoed like distant thunder. I remember the cold marble floor under my sneakers. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I clutched a wrinkled $20 bill like it could save me. They said they'd be back in 15 minutes. I waited for hours. When their car finally drove by, my father waved and smiled as if it was a game. My mother leaned out the window and called, "Let's see how you find your way home." That was the moment I learned love could feel like cruelty. After they disappeared into traffic, I stood frozen beside that tall pillar. All around me, families hugged, couples hurried to catch trains, children held tight to their parents' hands. I felt invisible, like I didn't belong to anyone. My heart pounded so loud it made my ears ring. I kept telling myself they would come back, that any second now I'd see their faces again. But minutes stretched into hours. My legs started to ache and my throat burned from holding back tears. I was too afraid to ask for help. My parents always warned me that strangers were dangerous, that the police would lock up disobedient kids. So I waited and waited, trying to be brave, clutching that crumpled bill as the sun slipped lower through the station windows. As the afternoon faded, fear turned into something colder. A quiet certainty that no one was coming for me. My stomach twisted in knots and I felt a wave of shame. Maybe this was my fault. Maybe I deserved it for never being good enough. I thought about the night before when I brought home my report card. All A's except one A- in science. My father's face had gone red with disappointment. My mother's voice was so calm when she said, "You need to learn real lessons." Standing there alone, I finally understood. This was their lesson. They believed abandoning me would make me stronger. Instead, it broke something inside me I wouldn't find again for years. Eventually, my legs gave out and I sank to the floor beside my backpack. I tried to look busy like I was waiting by choice, but inside I felt small and hollow. Every time the doors opened, I searched for their faces. They never appeared. The station grew colder as evening came. I counted the tiles on the floor to distract myself. 47 rows. Then I lost count when my eyes filled with tears. I wondered how long it would take for someone to notice me, for someone to care that a child was sitting alone with no way home. My voice felt trapped in my throat, too heavy to call for help. Hours passed before a woman with silver hair and red glasses finally approached me. She knelt so her eyes were level with mine. Her voice was soft, careful, like she knew I might bolt. "Honey, are you lost?" she asked. My lips parted, but no sound came out. I tried to nod, but my neck wouldn't move. All I could do was stare at her kind face and start to cry. She didn't look annoyed or afraid. She just sat there with me, waiting for the sobs to slow. When I could finally speak, I whispered, "They left me. They're not coming back." Saying the words made it real in a way I hadn't felt before. She introduced herself as Janet and offered me a small bottle of water. My hands trembled so badly I nearly dropped it. She asked my name and I told her in a whisper, Jennifer, though that name already felt like it belonged to someone else. Janet listened without interrupting as I tried to explain. About the A-, about the lesson I was supposed to learn, about the car that drove away. Her eyes filled with something like sorrow. "This isn't your fault," she said firmly. No one had ever said that to me before. I wanted to believe her, but I couldn't. Not yet. All I felt was the empty space where my family used to be. Janet led me to a quiet office near the station's administrative desk. The walls were covered in faded posters about train safety. She handed me a blanket even though it wasn't cold and sat across from me without saying much. When the security officer arrived, he asked gentle questions. My parents' names, where we lived, our phone number. I answered each one in a flat, tired voice. Every word felt heavy. At some point, he stepped out to call the police. I remember watching the clock on the wall tick from minute to minute, thinking about how my parents were probably already home, eating dinner, pretending I didn't exist. Segment 8. A female police officer named Teresa came to take my statement. She looked tired but kind, her uniform neat, her eyes steady. She offered me hot chocolate in a paper cup. I wrapped my hands around it, grateful for something warm to hold. She asked if I felt safe going home. My throat closed up and I couldn't answer. That silence must have told her everything. She nodded slowly, writing in her notebook. "We're going to take care of you," she promised. I wanted to believe her, but trust was already a luxury I couldn't afford. All I knew was that I wasn't going home that night. Maybe not ever. That evening, they drove me to the police station downtown. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as I sat in a small room clutching the blanket Janet had given me. My eyes were raw from crying, but the tears kept coming anyway. A social worker named Laura introduced herself. She spoke in a calm, steady voice that made me feel a little less like I was drifting. She asked if my parents had ever done something like this before. I told her about the grocery store, the amusement park, my birthday alone. She didn't look shocked, only sad. "None of this is okay," she said quietly. The words landed somewhere deep inside me, a tiny seed of truth I wasn't sure would ever grow. Laura explained that I'd be staying with a foster family for the night. My heart sank. I pictured strangers who would glare at me the way my parents did when I disappointed them. But Laura kept her voice gentle. "They're kind people. You don't have to talk about anything until you're ready." When we pulled up to the small house, the porch light was on. A woman with warm eyes and curly hair stood waiting. "I'm Sarah," she said softly. "Come in, sweetheart." Inside smelled like cinnamon and clean laundry. It felt nothing like home, but at least no one was yelling. As I sat at their kitchen table trying to eat spaghetti I couldn't taste, I wondered if my parents were thinking about me at all. That night, Sarah's daughter Emily showed me to a small bedroom with pale yellow walls. She handed me a folded pair of pajamas and a toothbrush. "If you need anything, my room's just across the hall," she whispered. I thanked her, though my voice barely came out. When she left, I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the suitcase I didn't have. The blanket smelled like fabric softener instead of stale smoke. I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my parents' car pulling away. My mother's face when she yelled, "Let's see how you find your way home." The words replayed again and again, sharp as broken glass. In the morning, Sarah made pancakes and set a plate in front of me. I tried to eat, but could only swallow a few bites. My stomach felt like it was tied in knots. She didn't push. She just sat with me, sipping her coffee as if silence was perfectly fine. After breakfast, Laura returned. Her expression was careful, almost gentle. "We spoke to your parents last night," she said. I held my breath, waiting for her to tell me they were coming to get me. "They said this was a lesson," she continued. "They don't think they did anything wrong." My chest tightened. Even now they believed abandoning me was love. Laura said there would be a meeting the next day to decide what would happen next. She promised I didn't have to go anywhere I didn't feel safe. I nodded, though I didn't know what safe felt like anymore. The rest of that day blurred into quiet hours. Sarah offered to play board games, and Emily asked if I wanted to watch TV. I tried to join them, but I felt like a ghost sitting in their living room. That night, I lay in the unfamiliar bed and thought about everything I'd ever done wrong. As if some hidden flaw in me had earned this punishment. Even then, part of me still believed I deserved it. The next afternoon, Laura drove me to a government building downtown. My hands wouldn't stop shaking as we walked down a long hallway. She paused before a door marked Family Services Conference Room. Inside, a long table waited. Two strangers sat at one end with folders and tired eyes. Laura introduced them as her supervisor and a court liaison. I barely heard their names. My mind was stuck on the empty chairs across the table. 5 minutes later, the door opened. My parents walked in looking smaller than I remembered. My father's face was gray and drawn. My mother clutched her purse like it was the only thing keeping her upright. Neither of them looked at me. They sat down without a word. The silence felt like a weight pressing on my chest. Finally, my mother spoke, her voice thin. "Jennifer, this has all been blown out of proportion." My father cleared his throat. "We were teaching you independence," he said, not meeting my eyes. "It wasn't supposed to go this far." I wanted to scream that it had always gone too far, that every cruel lesson had chipped away at me piece by piece. But my voice stayed trapped behind my teeth. Laura's supervisor leaned forward. "You left your daughter alone in a city she didn't know," she said firmly, "with no phone, no plan, and no care for what might happen." My parents didn't respond. When they finally looked at me, their eyes were flat. My mother spoke first. "You're exaggerating how bad it was," she said. "You could have called us." I swallowed hard. "I didn't have a phone," I whispered. My voice trembled, but I forced the words out. "You left me there on purpose." My father sighed, rubbing his temples. "We expected you to figure it out, to show some backbone." Hearing them say it out loud made something inside me go cold. They truly believed abandoning me was some kind of noble test, a way to prove I was worth loving, and in that moment I realized they'd never understand why it was wrong. The court liaison asked if I wanted to go home with them. My heart beat so loud I thought everyone could hear it. I looked at my hands, then up at Laura. "No," I said, my voice clearer than I expected. "I don't want to go back." My mother flinched. My father's mouth opened like he might argue, but no words came. For once, their disbelief didn't matter. Laura nodded slowly. "Thank you for telling us," she said. Her calm steadiness felt like the only solid thing in the room. As I sat there, I realized something important. Saying no didn't mean I was weak. It meant I finally knew what I deserved. After the meeting, Laura walked me back to her car. The late afternoon sun felt too bright, like the world had moved on without me. I climbed into the back seat and pulled the seatbelt across my lap with shaking hands. She turned around and met my eyes. "You did something very brave today," she said. I didn't feel brave. I felt hollow and tired, like all my strength had drained away. On the drive back to Sarah's house, I watched cars pass and wondered if any of them held families who loved each other without conditions. Families who didn't confuse cruelty for care. When we arrived, Sarah was waiting at the door, her expression gentle. She didn't ask questions. She just hugged me, and for the first time in days, I let myself lean into it. That evening, I sat at the kitchen table while Sarah cooked dinner. The smell of roasted chicken filled the room warm and steady. Emily set out plates and glasses without saying much, as if she understood that words weren't what I needed. When we finally sat down to eat, I tried to focus on the simple rhythm of passing dishes and taking small bites. My hands still trembled, but no one pointed it out. No one sighed or rolled their eyes. After dinner, Sarah offered to braid my hair. I almost said no, but something in me was too tired to resist kindness. As her fingers worked gently, I closed my eyes and felt for just a moment like maybe I belonged somewhere. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything I'd said in that conference room. The word no echoed in my mind, both terrifying and freeing. For so long, I'd believed love meant staying quiet, staying small, doing whatever it took to earn approval. But sitting across from my parents, I finally saw the truth. No amount of trying would ever be enough for them. I pulled the blanket up to my chin and let the tears come. They weren't the panicked sobs from before, just slow, quiet grief for the childhood I'd never get back. In the darkness, I promised myself that one day I would build a life where love didn't have to hurt. The next morning, Laura returned with more papers to sign. Her voice stayed calm as she explained the process. Court hearings, evaluations, decisions that would shape where I lived. I tried to listen, but part of me floated somewhere far away. My mind kept drifting back to my father's face when I said I wouldn't come home. The shock in his eyes, as if he'd never imagined I had a choice. When Laura finished, she looked at me carefully. "You don't have to be brave every minute," she said. "It's okay to let other people help." I nodded, though I didn't know how to do that yet. Trust felt like something I'd have to relearn piece by fragile piece. Later that day, Sarah took me for a walk around her neighborhood. The sidewalks were lined with trees heavy with summer leaves. Kids rode bikes in driveways. Dogs barked behind fences. She didn't ask about my parents. She just pointed out which houses grew the best roses, where Emily caught fireflies at night. Her voice was soft, never pressing for answers I wasn't ready to give. For the first time in weeks, my shoulders relaxed a little. I realized how different it felt to be near someone who expected nothing from me. As we walked back to the house, I caught myself thinking that maybe safe could look like this: quiet streets, small kindnesses, no one waiting to punish me for being myself. That evening, Laura called with news. My parents had been given a choice: complete counseling and supervised visits, or give up their rights. They hadn't decided yet. I sat on the couch, the phone pressed to my ear, feeling strangely numb. Part of me still hoped they would call and say they were sorry, that they finally understood what they'd done. But deep down I knew better. My father would call it an overreaction. My mother would insist I was too sensitive. After I hung up, Sarah brought me a cup of tea. She didn't say anything, just sat beside me. I wrapped my hands around the mug and let the warmth seep in, trying to believe I deserved this gentle care. A week later, Laura came by to talk in person. My parents had made their decision. They were surrendering their rights. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Even when I'd imagined this ending, I hadn't truly believed they would choose to let me go so easily. Sarah reached for my hand, her touch steady. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. The sympathy in her voice made my chest ache. I wanted to scream, to ask what I'd done that was so terrible they couldn't fight for me, but the words stayed locked inside. All I could do was sit there, holding on to Sarah's hand like it was the only thing keeping me from disappearing. That night, I lay awake, staring at the pale yellow walls. My parents were no longer legally mine. The thought felt unreal, like a story happening to someone else. I tried to picture their faces, but all I saw was the car driving away, the taillights shrinking into darkness, my mother's voice calling out, "Let's see how you find your way home." A part of me still wanted them to come back, to say they were wrong, that they loved me after all. But another part, the quieter part I was just starting to trust, whispered that maybe losing them was the first step toward finding myself. The next morning, Sarah made blueberry muffins. I sat at the kitchen table, watching her move around the warm, bright room. For a while, we didn't talk. The quiet felt safe. Finally, she sat across from me and said, "You don't have to decide anything right now. You can stay here as long as you need." Her words landed softly, like a promise I didn't know how to accept. I nodded, though part of me still wondered if kindness always came with a hidden cost. But as I took a small bite of the muffin, I realized it was the first thing I had tasted in days. Just warm, simple sweetness. A reminder that life could hold small comforts even in the middle of so much loss. A few weeks later, Laura returned with more paperwork. She said there was a family interested in fostering me long-term. Their names were Thomas and Sarah Blake. When I heard Sarah's name, my chest loosened just a little. "Is it the same Sarah?" I asked, almost afraid of the answer. Laura smiled. "Yes. She and Thomas want you to know you'd be welcome." I looked down at my hands. I didn't know if I was ready to belong to anyone again, but a quiet part of me hoped maybe this time would be different. I nodded slowly. "Okay," I whispered. It was the closest I could get to saying yes. Segment 28. The day I moved in, Sarah helped me carry my small bag upstairs. She opened the door to a room with soft blue walls and a window seat covered in cushions. "This is yours," she said gently. "You can decorate however you like." I stood in the doorway, too overwhelmed to step inside. No one had ever given me a space just for me without conditions. When I finally crossed the threshold, I traced my hand along the bookshelf waiting to be filled. For the first time in a long while, I felt something almost like hope. A quiet voice inside whispered that maybe, just maybe, this could be a beginning. That evening, Thomas came home from work. He was tall, with kind eyes and paint smudges on his hands. He taught art at the high school. He smiled and said, "We're glad you're here, Hannah." Hearing my new name in his voice made my throat tighten. At dinner, we talked about simple things: what books I liked, whether I wanted to try planting flowers in the backyard. No one asked about my past. No one needed me to explain. After the dishes were washed, Thomas showed me where the art supplies were kept. "Whenever you feel ready," he said, "these are yours." And somehow that small offer felt like the biggest kindness I'd ever been given. Segment 30. That night, I sat on the window seat, sketchbook balanced on my knees. My pencil moved without me thinking, tracing lines that slowly became a picture. A girl standing alone in a train station staring out at the dark. I didn't cry this time. I just kept drawing, letting all the old fear pour onto the page. Each line felt like letting go of something I didn't want to carry anymore. When I finished, I closed the sketchbook and held it against my chest. Outside, the garden lights glowed softly. For the first time, I thought maybe healing wasn't a destination. Maybe it was just taking one small step, then another. Weeks passed, and little by little, I began to trust that Thomas and Sarah meant what they said, that I didn't have to earn their kindness or prove I deserved to stay. When I spilled juice on the kitchen floor, I froze waiting for the explosion, but Sarah just handed me a towel and smiled. "No big deal," she said. I didn't know what to do with that gentleness. It felt so unfamiliar, it almost hurt. Later that night, lying in my new bed, I realized I hadn't thought about my parents all day. It startled me how good that felt, like taking a deep breath after years of holding it in. One afternoon, Thomas found me sketching at the kitchen table. He pulled up a chair and studied my drawing quietly. "You have a gift?" he said, his voice calm and sure. No one had ever said that before. I looked down embarrassed, but a warm glow spread through my chest. "If you ever want help learning new techniques, I'd be glad to show you," he offered. There was no pressure in his words, just an open door. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. In that moment, I understood something important. Maybe trust wasn't about forgetting what had happened. Maybe it was choosing to believe that some people could be different. The seasons shifted, summer sliding into fall. School started again. I walked the halls with my books pressed tight to my chest, trying to look invisible. Some days were easier than others. I still jumped when voices got too loud. I still flinched when someone moved too quickly. But slowly I found small moments of safety. At lunch, a girl named Clara asked if I wanted to sit with her. She didn't push when I said maybe next time, just smiled and said, "Whenever you're ready." That kindness stayed with me the rest of the day. It felt like proof that the world wasn't all sharp edges, that maybe there was space for me after all. Segment 34. At-home evenings were calm. Thomas painted in his studio. Sarah read on the couch. Sometimes we watched movies together, no one expecting me to talk if I didn't want to. One night, after the credits rolled, Sarah turned to me. "We'd like to adopt you," she said, her voice steady, "but only if you're ready." My throat closed up. Part of me wanted to say yes right away. Another part was terrified to belong to anyone again. I looked into her eyes and saw only patience. No rush, no disappointment, just an open place waiting for me. For the first time, I thought maybe family didn't have to mean pain. Maybe it could mean coming home. I didn't answer that night. I needed time to let the idea settle. Adoption. A word that meant something lasting, something I wasn't sure I deserved. Over the next few weeks, Sarah and Thomas never brought it up again. They just kept showing up in small, steady ways, driving me to therapy, asking about my day, saving a spot for me at the dinner table. Little by little, my fear began to loosen. I started to imagine what it might feel like to be theirs fully and forever. One evening, as we cleaned up after dinner, I took a deep breath. "I'd like that," I whispered. Sarah turned, eyes shining, and pulled me into her arms. The day the adoption was finalized, I wore a pale blue dress Sarah had picked out. In the courthouse, Thomas held my hand while the judge read the papers. When he asked if I wanted to change my name, I didn't hesitate. "Hannah Blake," I said. The sound of it felt clean and new, like a door opening. Sarah squeezed my shoulder. "Welcome home," she whispered. On the drive back, I watched the city pass by. For once, I didn't feel like a girl lost in a train station. I felt like someone who had found her place, someone who belonged, not because she was perfect, but simply because she was loved. Years passed, and the girl who once sat alone in Union Station slowly grew into someone steadier. I went to college for graphic design, carrying my sketchbooks filled with all the things I hadn't known how to say. Thomas and Sarah cheered me on from the sidelines, never doubting I'd find my way. When I graduated, they were there in the front row, clapping with tears in their eyes. I moved into my own apartment, painted the walls soft blue, and hung my drawings where I could see them every day. Sometimes in the quiet, I thought about my parents and the life I left behind. but their shadows didn't feel so big anymore. In my late 20s, I met Daniel. He was patient in ways I hadn't known people could be. The first time he reached for my hand and I flinched, he didn't pull away or ask questions. He just waited until I was ready. Little by little, I let him in. I told him about the train station, the empty birthdays, the way love had always felt like a test. He didn't try to fix it, he just listened. One evening, sitting on the couch with Vince asleep at our feet, he said, "You deserve a life that feels safe." His voice was so sure I almost believed him. And maybe for the first time, I was ready to try. Not long after I got the call, my brother Matthew's voice on the line, older and strained. Our father had a heart attack. He was in the hospital asking about me. I sat in my kitchen, the phone pressed to my ear, my heart beating too fast. Part of me wanted to hang up to pretend none of it mattered anymore. But another part, the part that still remembered that small girl waiting by the pillar, knew I had to decide. Daniel reached across the table and took my hand. "Whatever you choose, it's your choice," he said. I closed my eyes and let the truth settle. I wasn't that powerless child anymore. Whatever happened next, it would be on my terms. A week later, I walked into the hospital room where my father lay pale and smaller than I'd ever seen him. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The years stretched out between us, heavy with everything we'd never said. When he finally looked up, his eyes were damp. "Hannah," he whispered, voice cracking, "I'm sorry." I nodded, feeling something inside me loosen, not forgiveness, but a quiet release. "I know," I said, "but I'm not here to fix the past." As I turned to leave, I felt lighter than I ever had. I wasn't the girl he left behind. I was Hannah Blake, and I had found my own way home. If this story touched something in you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Share your experiences in the comments. Your voice matters here. And if you'd like to walk with me through more stories of healing and hope, don't forget to subscribe. This is just one of many journeys, and you're always welcome here.